Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Religious Studies Podcast. This is Webb Glauner speaking. And today we talked to Scott Goolsby, who is a Buddhist, but he has a PhD in religious studies. So he's with an emphasis on Buddhism and Hinduism. So today we talked about Hinduism with him. And yeah, it was super interesting. We talked about Mardi Gras and crack, talked about duty, and all sorts of stuff. So have fun. So we just finished talking about Buddhism with Scott here. He is a Buddhist, and but he's also a religious major with a emphasis on Buddhism and Hinduism. And he just said that if he had to choose a religion other than Buddhism, he would choose Hinduism. So we're going to talk about Hinduism today. And my questions kind of don't apply quite as much, considering he isn't a practicing Hindu. But we're going to see where it goes. So the first question is, what makes Hinduism in particular so attractive to you? And that doesn't really apply as much. But if you weren't a Buddhist, you would be a Hindu. So why is that?
Oh gosh, because Hinduism is just absolutely fascinating. It is one of the oldest religions. I think it's actually the oldest religion still practiced in not the United States, still practiced in the actual world. It's very vast. It's very ancient. I don't think they actually even know how old it is.
Oh, wow.
It was at least the holy books date to at the very least 4000 BC, but it's probably even older than that.
Wow.
It has anywhere from thousands of gods to millions of gods. It's just the mythology is just awesome. It's fascinating. They don't hold back. They're very, they will go into sexuality. They will, like, in one myth, Shiva's penis was cut off and it went in through all of the universes and destroyed stuff. They don't care. And it's just these, and it's very they're just very awesome, I think, very fascinating, just very, very I took a class in grad school I took several classes in grad school, but and all my Hindu classes, it was just like fascinating to listen to the professor, especially the ones from India, talk about Indian culture and Indian mythology. It's just like story time. I love their mythology and I love their way of viewing the world. To them, the sacred is so real. The veil between the gods and us is so thin. Like they really believe that the gods are right here, and we can talk to them, and we have daily access to them. God is not somewhere way out there in the sky. No, the gods, goddesses, what have you, are here on the planet with us, and we're dealing with them. And it's so real to them, and it's so they have such a dealing with us in our everyday life. The gods do, and I just find that so cool and fascinating.
So I've heard of Hinduism be described as a polytheistic religion, but I've also heard that it's described more monotheistic with Brahman. How does Brahman work?
Actually, to most Hindus, Brahman doesn't play that big of a role. Traditionally speaking, there's the three main gods: Shiva, Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahman. But most Hindus are either Shaivite, meaning they mainly worship Shiva, or Vaishnavite, meaning they mostly worship Vishnu. Brahma doesn't play that big of a role to most Hindus. It's either Vishnu or Shiva. To most Hindus, there are some who Brahma will, but it's usually people are a Shaivite or a Vaishnavite.
Okay, so is there an afterlife? Do you eventually go off to like a heaven, or how does death jive?
You can, but it's most Hindus will believe in reincarnation, and we are reincarnated usually on this plane. But you can be reincarnated as another being.
Okay.
That's complicated, but and sometimes I sometimes I have to think, is this Buddhism or Hinduism? But I know they believe in reincarnation, and you can be an animal, and you can be reincarnated in other planes. Um, so you want to be a good person, and there are heavens, and but mostly those are for the gods. And for the Hindus, the gods aren't as mortal as they are for the Buddhists. The Buddhists believe that the gods die just like we do, but they live a long time. But the gods suffer and die just like we do, but they live longer. But Hindus, their gods are more godlike for the Hindus.
What common misconceptions exist about Hinduism?
Oh, that's a hard question because I don't know a lot about what people actually think. It's funny, when I was living in San Francisco, I would meet Indians and be like, "Oh, are you a Hindu?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Tell me more about it." And they're like, "You're a grad student in Hinduism. You know more about it than I do." And I'm like, "Crap." So I think that it's I really don't know how to answer that question because I don't know a lot what other people think about it, here in the United States. I just know that it's personally fascinating and I get pumped up about it. But I really honestly don't know how to answer that question.
I have something that I think is probably a misconception.
Okay.
Something that I've heard before, and it's probably a fairy tale.
Sure.
I heard that they believe that you're born into your place. So
That you're what? I'm sorry?
you're born into your place. So if you are born in the slums, super poor, and you are, just poor, wretched life, you're getting what you deserve based on your prior life, and you don't deserve charity necessarily.
Oh, okay. Yes, there is some truth to that, and there is some not truth to that. Okay, so you were born there and you do deserve that. That was your karmic situation, but you can get out of it. So I think what you were saying, people believe you deserve to stay there. No, you can work your way out. You can burn that karma out and get out of that situation. So yeah, your karma would say, yeah, you were a bad person in a past life, so you were born in the slums, but you can be a good person and try and get out of that situation as well.
Well, that's good. I always thought that sucked.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of leads into the caste system. How does the caste system work?
Oh, the caste system is Hinduism's dark side, and it is not actually scriptural, but it is more cultural.
Okay.
And it came up and it was kind of needed at the time. And I'm talking about thousands of years ago at the time. So the caste system has traditionally five castes, five different what do you want to call them, like five sections, five places of being where. Okay, and
yeah, I'm picking up a going down.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm saying five because I'm counting these Shudras, the untouchables. Okay. Most typically people only say four, but I'm counting the untouchables in there because they're a caste.
Okay.
And there's an interesting thing about them, about the untouchables that I'll get into.
All right.
So we've got the top one, the Brahmins, the priests. And the funny thing is they typically have all the power because they have access to all the sacred books and they know Sanskrit and they have the money. And then the ones right below them, the Kshatriyas, the warriors. And then the ones right below them, the Vaishnavas, the merchants. Shit, they're not Vaishnavas. Crap, I probably shouldn't swear. Shoot, I'm blanking on what they're called.
I'll look it up for you.
Okay, cool.
Untouchables?
No, it's the merchant caste.
Vaishyas?
Vaishyas.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're the merchants. And then we have the Shudras, who are like who are the lowest. And then we have the Dalits, who are super untouchables. They're the lowest of the low. So to be a Dalit, you're basically trash.
Okay.
So basically a Dalit is somebody like we would be Dalits, because we're not born Indian, we're not born Hindu. And when Buddha came along, he revolutionized all of this, because Buddhism does not take part in the caste system, and Buddhism does not. But the interesting thing is the Shudras, the untouchables, still had their own power, still had their own place in society, because they're the only ones that could deal with corpses.
Okay.
They're the only ones that could deal with the sacred. They kept the sacred fire that burns the bodies.
Mhm.
They're the only ones that could cut people's hair. So they still had their place in society, even though they weren't supposed to be spoken to by the Brahmins, and supposed to be, they were both so disrespected.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they had
They were important.
yeah, they're important still, for much. But I think today the caste system is losing a lot of importance, thank God. But it's like I said, it's not scriptural. It was more of a cultural thing as India was growing up. And I think we have it here in our society too. It's just not
as regimented.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So next question: are there any holy books in Hinduism? I'm assuming it's going to be the same thing as Buddhism.
Exactly. Hundreds. And one of them, the Mahabharata, is one of the longest stories in the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And you might like to read some of them, like the Ramayana, fascinating story, and Bhagavad Gita, really good stuff. But it's ever evolving.
So is it another open canon?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yeah, and also very old.
Yes. Who wrote these stories? Is it just all sorts of people?
Yeah, the Mahabharata, like I said, is very, very long, and it's compiled over hundreds of years by hundreds of people.
Kind of like the Bible's kind of thing.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And like the Vedas, the 4 Vedas are the original holy texts for the Hindus, and nobody's really sure, because it's so old.
Yeah.
Like I said, nobody's really sure how old ancient it is. Like it goes at least to 4000 BC.
Oh, wow.
Could be older, and so nobody's quite sure where it came from. It's just really sacred old stuff, and it's written in Sanskrit, which is the sacred ancient language of, it's like the equivalent of Latin to India.
Okay.
Except it's even more sacred. It is the language that gives birth. It's from which all life came from, Sanskrit, and it's the language of the gods, and it's just like every syllable has a sacred meaning, and every syllable has a sacred. They would have a sect of priests that stood back and listened to make sure every syllable, when they were doing the rituals, every syllable was said correctly, because if you didn't, it could unravel the fabric of reality.
Eesh.
Yeah, it's a big
pressure.
deal. Yeah. Oh yeah. Sanskrit is super sacred to the Hindus. It gave birth, like I said, it gave birth to all of reality. Yeah.
So considering Hinduism is so old,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can answer this next question, but can you give like an explanation of the history of Hinduism? Like, how did it come to be? Where did it come from?
Well, nobody is really certain where it came from.
Yeah.
For sure, it started out in northern India in the Dravidian Harappa culture. I'm sorry, not Dravidian, but the Harappa culture in northern India. But nobody's sure if it was already present in the southern India. So there's the Vedic culture, which is where the Rig Vedas come from, the Rig Veda and the 4 ancient Vedas. Which is where our term Hindu, quote unquote, comes from. But as Hinduism exists today, it doesn't have much to do with the Vedas. And we're not really sure how much of Hinduism, quote unquote, Hinduism is a really slippery term, because what Hinduism is an amalgamation of hundreds of religions that were present in India and that are present in India. And they were tribal ancient religions, and they're just kind of all interrelated and intergraded. And so it's Hinduism is like hundreds of different religions that are somewhat interrelated. So that happen to get along and not be a bunch of a-holes to each other, and have the same holy books. And so it's hard to say how many of these religions were already in India when the Aryans came down into India through the north, and which ones weren't, and where they came from, because this all happened at least around 4000 BC. And nobody's really sure. That's one of the things I think is fascinating about it, because it's like I said, it's the oldest religion in the world practiced today, and nobody's really sure where exactly or how exactly it came into being yet. Well, they're still doing a lot of research into that.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
So Hinduism's theology is huge. What kind of stuff does it talk about? Like, what's important to it?
Yeah. That's a very hard question. Being a good person, the Atman, which is interesting, because that's where we get our word for breath. The Atman is the soul. And the German word for breath is Atman. A lot of our words came from Sanskrit. Oh gosh, being a good person, being kind, doing your duty, very much doing your duty. If you read the Bhagavad Gita, you'll learn that doing your duty is a super important thing, super important.
Like Dharma.
Yeah, Dharma.
Okay.
Exactly. I highly recommend you read the Bhagavad Gita. It's not a super long book, and it's fascinating. And the Ramayana, both are pretty short, and you'll love them.
Okay.
Doing your duty, being kind, and sticking to your duty, not being an a-hole. It's very similar to Buddhism in that regard, except Hinduism believes that you have an immortal soul and Buddhism doesn't.
Okay.
Which is a very complicated thing that we don't want to get into.
Okay. So who or what is the most important part of Hinduism? Is it like an idea or a specific god more important than the rest?
It would be which kind of Hindu you are. So for the Shaivites, it's Shiva. Okay. And for the Vaishnavites, it's Vishnu. So Vishnu or Shiva usually. But for either one of them, they would still respect the other god. So the Vaishnavites still think that Shiva is a big deal, and the Shaivites still think that Vishnu is a big deal. Is a bigger deal. Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's very complicated.
What does Hinduism require from its devotees?
Lots of praying and chanting. Most of them are vegetarian, and at the very least don't eat cows, because cows are sacred. And I never really got a straight answer from any of my professors as to why cows are sacred, but cows are sacred.
Okay.
Can't tell you why. I tried to find out, but and I guess they'll just walk down the street, cars go around them. It's wild sauce. So, Hindus will typically be vegetarian. I'm sorry, what was the question again? What does Hinduism
require from a devotee?
A lot of praying, a lot of chanting. You'll often see Hindus and Buddhists with malas, which is the string of 108 beads. And so they'll often say their prayers there.
Prayer for each bead.
Yeah.
Catholicism and the Rosary.
I think that's where the Catholics got it. I think the Catholics got it from the Hindus and the Buddhists, actually. Yeah.
That's all my questions. We used a few terms. We use Brahman and Dharma here. What do
Mhm.
those even mean? For somebody who doesn't know.
Brahma is one of what is often termed the Hindu Trinity. There's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva.
Mm.
Brahma is the preserver. He preserves the universe. Vishnu is the I'm sorry, that was totally false. Brahma is the creator.
Okay.
Brahma created the universe. Vishnu is the preserver. He preserves the universe. And Shiva is the destroyer who destroys the universe so there can be more creation. So that's the Hindu Trinity. But it's also said that they're all part of Brahma.
Okay.
Dharma has many, many definitions. There's Dharma with a capital D and Dharma with a small d, which we use in the United States. However, in Sanskrit, there's no capitalization. Dharma can mean your duty, your purpose. It can also mean sacred teaching. Dharma is a very complex term, but typically it means sacred teaching or your like divinely inspired, divinely appointed purpose.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I might be wrong about this, but I think I heard somewhere that there's a story in one of the books where there's a warrior, and he's really bad at being a warrior, but he was born into the warrior caste. So it's more important to be a warrior than to be good at something that you're not born into being.
This is from the Bhagavad Gita.
Bhagavad Gita. Okay.
He's talking to Lord Krishna. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
So Lord Krishna is telling him he needs to fulfill his duty as a kshatriya,
Mhm.
which is a little warrior caste,
Yeah.
and be a warrior. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And even if he'd be better at being something else, a baker,
Mhm.
because he's a warrior, he has to be a warrior, even if he's bad at it. Okay. That makes sense. Does old Corey have any questions?
Old Corey, that cracks me up.
I'm young Corey.
Yes, I've written down two.
Sweet.
Is there a holy day, or is it just a
Hundreds. And I'm glad you asked that. There are more than I actually know of, but let me tell you about one that comes off the top of my head. There is one that is actually the biggest celebration in the history of humanity and the biggest gathering of humans in the world, called crap. The Maha, which Maha means great, and it happens every 12 years. Shoot.
I'm trying to look it up. What would I search for?
Search for the biggest, Hinduism's biggest holy day or biggest festival.
That's it right there, right?
Not Mahashivaratri. Ganesha Chaturthi, Pongo.
Oh, no.
It's not the $25 bill. Oh, Kumela. So the Kumela happens, I think it's every 7 years.
Okay.
And then every oh gosh. And then every something else years, I think it's 21 years, is the Maha Kumela, which is the Great Kumela.
Okay.
And every Kumela is huge. It's the biggest gathering of Hindus, and it happens on the banks of the Ganges. The Ganges is the sacred river to Hindus. Mm-hmm. But the Maha Kumela this year just had 1 billion people attend it.
Oh, wow.
No, it wasn't this year. It was 2 years ago.
Holy crap.
So it was the largest gathering of humans ever in the history of the world. And I guess it was amazing and insane. And I can't imagine. Part of me wishes I would have been there, and part of me is glad I wasn't. But they have like all the holy people from all the sects there and all the traditions there, and they had a yogi buried alive for several days, and of course he survived. I don't know how they do this. The yogis can do crazy stuff.
It seems like Mardi Gras on crack.
Yeah, yes, exactly. That's a perfect definition. Mardi Gras on crack with lots of gods. Yeah.
That's what we should call this podcast. Polytheistic Mardi Gras on crack.
Yeah, there you go. I love that.
Funny. Okay, I have one more. Buddhism, a derivative of Hinduism.
Yes, actually, Buddha was a Hindu. I like to explain to people that Buddhism is to Hinduism kind of like Christianity is to Judaism. It's a branch of Hinduism. Buddha was born a Hindu, and he originally started out as a Hindu, but he said, Hinduism isn't answering my questions. It isn't doing the deed. I'm going to break off and do my own thing.
Okay.
But they're very closely related. Much like Judaism and Christianity are very closely related. Judaism and Christianity are both Abrahamic religions. Islam is one of them, is also an Abrahamic religion. So those three are all very closely related. Buddhism and Hinduism are part of the wisdom religions, and along with Jainism, and they're all very closely related. So Buddha, and sometimes I confuse myself, especially since I haven't been part of the university for a few years. I get kind of rusty and like, is that the Hindus believe that too, or is that just us Buddhists? I can't remember. So yeah.
All righty.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you much.
You're very welcome.
Super interesting.
Oh.